The wind carried dust through the narrow streets of Dry Hollow, whispering against wooden shutters and rattling loose signs that hadn't been fixed in years. It was the kind of town where nothing truly changed, only faded. Clara Hayes walked through it like a shadow that belonged there. Her dress was simple, the color long worn down by sun and time. Her hands were rough from work, her posture straight not from pride, but from habit. People greeted her when necessary, nodded when polite, but no one ever really saw her. At 35, Clara existed in a quiet space society had already decided for her. Too old to be desired, too plain to be remembered. She had stopped arguing with that truth long ago. That morning, she was carrying a small bundle of herbs and cloth, remedies for old Mrs. Dalton, when she noticed the commotion near the center of town. A crowd had gathered. Men stood with arms crossed, boys leaned against posts, and a few women whispered behind gloved hands. At the center of it all stood a man no one had seen before. He didn't belong to Dry Hollow. Cole Bennett. Even before she heard his name, Clara could tell. He was young, no more than 28, and carried himself with the careless confidence of someone who had never been told no, and believed he never would be. His boots were polished, his coat well cut, and his posture spoke of ownership, even here where he owned nothing yet. Beside him, a powerful black stallion reared slightly, agitated. "Easy now," Cole muttered, gripping the reins. The horse was limping. Clara noticed immediately. A shallow cut along its front leg, nothing fatal, but enough to cause pain if left untreated. She hesitated, then stepped forward. "You should clean that wound," she said calmly, her voice steady, despite the eyes that turned toward her. "It'll fester if you leave it." Cole barely looked at her at first. His attention remained on the horse, irritation flickering across his face. "I know how to handle my animals," he replied. Clara didn't move. "That cut needs more than handling," she continued. "I have herbs." Now he looked at her, really looked. His eyes swept over her in a single glance, quick, dismissive, final. There was no curiosity in that gaze, no interest, only judgment, the kind that lands fast and sticks. Something shifted in the air. A few people in the crowd exchanged glances, sensing what was coming. Cole gave a short, humorless chuckle and adjusted his grip on the reins. "I'll pass," he said. Clara nodded once, accepting the refusal. She should have walked away. Normally she would have. But something, maybe the horse's uneven stance, maybe simple decency, kept her there one moment longer. "It's not a matter of pride," she said quietly. "Just care." That was when his expression changed. Not to anger, to something sharper. Amusement. And then, without lowering his voice, without even attempting kindness, he said it. "I don't take advice from women who look like they've already been left behind." A ripple of silence moved through the crowd. Clara felt it before she fully understood the words. He wasn't done. His eyes lingered, almost lazily now, as if the damage had already been done and he was simply finishing the thought. "Too old," he added, almost thoughtfully. Then, with a faint smirk, "Too plain." The words landed harder than they should have. Not because they were new, but because they were spoken out loud, clear, unapologetic, undeniable, the kind of truth people whispered behind closed doors, now dragged into the open. No one spoke. No one defended her. Dry Hollow had always been good at silence. Clara stood very still. For a brief moment, just a flicker, something passed through her eyes. Not tears, not even anger, something deeper. A quiet fracture. But it was gone just as quickly. She lowered her gaze slightly, not in submission, but in control. "Very well," she said softly. No wounded protest, just acceptance. She turned and walked away. Behind her, The murmur of voices slowly returned, awkward at first, then normal, as if nothing had happened, as if something hadn't shifted, as if a line hadn't been crossed. Clara kept walking until the noise faded behind her. Her grip tightened slightly around the bundle in her hands. Not enough for anyone to notice, but enough for her to feel. The wind picked up again, stronger now, and in the distance, far beyond the edges of town, a low, rolling sound echoed across the plains. Thunder. Clara paused for just a moment, her eyes lifting toward the horizon. Dark clouds were gathering, heavy, fast. A storm was coming. She exhaled slowly and continued forward, her steps steady, her expression unreadable. But something inside her had changed. Not broken, not weakened, sharpened. Back in the center of town, Cole Bennett mounted his horse with practiced ease, dismissing the moment as quickly as it had come. To him it was nothing, a passing remark, a forgettable woman. But the storm rolling in across the plains didn't care about pride, and before the next day ended, everything he believed about strength, worth, and survival would be broken. By late afternoon, the sky above Dry Hollow had turned the color of bruised steel. The air felt wrong, heavy, weighting. Even the usual sounds of the frontier, the clatter of wagon wheels, the distant laughter from the saloon, the restless shuffle of livestock, had begun to fade into something quieter, tighter, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Clara noticed it as she stepped out of Mrs. Dalton's home, her empty satchel hanging loosely at her side. The wind had changed direction. That was the first sign. The second was the silence of birds. She looked toward the horizon. Dark clouds were rolling in fast now, swallowing the pale sky in thick, churning layers. A storm wasn't just coming. It was arriving. Outside town, at the edge of a wide stretch of open land, Cole Bennett stood near the fencing of his newly claimed ranch, or what he intended to become one. A herd of cattle spread across the plains, large, restless, and increasingly uneasy. They shifted more than usual, hooves scraping against dry dirt, heads lifting at sounds only they could hear. Cole ran a hand along the neck of his black stallion. "Just weather," he muttered. But the horse didn't believe him. It tossed its head sharply, muscles tense beneath its sleek coat. Its injured leg, still untreated, quivered slightly. Cole frowned. For a brief moment, Clara's voice flickered in his mind. "It'll fester if you leave it." He brushed the thought away. "I've handled worse," he said under his breath, more to himself than the animal. A ranch hand approached from behind, his expression uneasy. "Storm's building fast. Might want to move the herd closer to the lower fields." "They'll hold." "They're spooked." "They're cattle," Cole snapped. "They spook at shadows." The man hesitated, then nodded reluctantly and stepped back. Pride had a way of silencing better judgment. The first thunderclap split the sky like a gunshot. Sharp, violent, immediate. The herd reacted instantly. Heads jerked up, bodies tightened. A ripple of tension moved through them like a wave traveling across water. Then lightning struck somewhere beyond the ridge. The world flashed white, and that was enough. The cattle broke. It started as a surge, then a rush, then chaos. Hundreds of animals lunged forward at once, hooves pounding, horns clashing, panic spreading faster than control could catch it. "Damn it!" Cole swung into the saddle in one fluid motion. "Move! Move!" The ranch hands scrambled, shouting, trying to flank the herd. But it was already too late. The storm roared overhead now, wind tearing across the plains, rain beginning to fall in sharp, stinging sheets. The cattle weren't running. They were fleeing, straight toward the canyon. Cole's jaw tightened. If they went over, everything would be lost. "Turn them!" he shouted, digging his heels into the stallion's sides. The horse lunged forward, despite the pain in its leg. They rode straight into the storm. Back in town, doors slammed shut as the rain intensified. People moved quickly now, securing what they could, calling for loved ones, pulling in anything that might be lost to the wind. Clara stood under the overhang of a wooden awning, watching the storm swallow the horizon. Then she heard it. Not thunder, something deeper. A rolling roar that didn't belong to the sky. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She stepped out into the rain, ignoring the sting of cold drops against her skin, and looked toward the plains. And then she saw it. Movement. A dark, shifting mass cutting through the storm. Fast. Too fast. Her breath caught. A stampede. Out on the open land, Cole fought to regain control, but control was slipping through his fingers like sand. "Drive them left," he shouted, trying to angle the herd away from the canyon's edge. But the storm was louder. The fear was stronger. The cattle surged forward, unstoppable. The stallion beneath him faltered. Just for a second. But in chaos, a second is enough. Its injured leg buckled slightly as it hit uneven ground, hidden beneath mud and rain. Cole's grip tightened. "Come on!" Another thunderclap exploded overhead. The horse panicked. It reared violently, throwing its weight back, and lost balance. Everything happened at once. The world tilted. The ground vanished beneath him. Cole was thrown hard, his body slamming into the earth with crushing force. The air left his lungs in a single brutal gasp. Before he could move, they were on him. Hooves, hundreds of them. The ground trembled as the herd thundered past, a living avalanche of muscle and terror. Cole tried to roll, tried to crawl, but pain exploded through his leg. Something was wrong, badly wrong. A hoof struck his side, another clipped his shoulder. Mud filled his mouth as he struggled to breathe. The sky flashed again, white, blinding, then darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. The roar of the stampede began to fade, not because it had stopped, but because he was slipping away. His last clear thought came uninvited. "Steady. It'll fester if you leave it." Clara. Then nothing. By the time the storm began to pass, the plains were unrecognizable. The herd was gone. The land was torn. And somewhere in the mud and silence, Cole Bennett lay broken, bleeding, alone, and far closer to death than pride had ever prepared him for. Morning came slowly to Dry Hollow. The storm had passed, but it left its mark behind. Mud-caked streets, broken fences, and a silence that felt heavier than the night before. The sky was pale, washed clean, as if nothing violent had ever touched it. But the land remembered, and so did the people. Clara stepped out just after sunrise, her boots sinking slightly into the softened earth. She had barely slept, not because of fear, but because of the sound she had heard before the storm swallowed everything. That deep, rolling thunder that wasn't thunder, a stampede. She followed the trail without asking anyone. She didn't need directions. The ground told the story clearly. Deep, chaotic hoofprints carved into the earth, broken brush, torn soil, a path of destruction leading away from the plains. Something else, too. Drag marks. Clara's expression tightened. She walked faster. They found him just beyond the ridge. Two ranch hands stood nearby, their faces grim, their voices low. "Should have died out there," one muttered. "Lucky or cursed. He ain't walking again, that's for sure." Clara didn't speak as she approached. Cole Bennett lay on a makeshift stretcher, barely conscious. His face was pale beneath dried mud and blood, his breathing shallow, uneven. One arm lay twisted at an unnatural angle, and his leg, Clara didn't look away, crushed, badly, the kind of injury that didn't forgive mistakes. "Move aside," she said calmly. The men glanced at her, surprised. He needs a doctor, one replied. He needs to stay alive long enough to see one, Clara answered. There was something in her tone, steady, certain, that made them hesitate, then step back. She knelt beside him, her hands already moving with quiet efficiency. She checked his pulse, then his breathing, her fingers firm but careful, despite the state he was in. Hot. Fever was already setting in. That leg will kill him before anything else, she said. Help me lift him. You're taking him? One of the men asked, confused. Clara met his eyes briefly. Yes. No explanation. No hesitation. Just a decision. Her home was small. One room, a narrow bed, a wooden table worn smooth by years of use. Shelves lined with jars of dried herbs, folded cloth, simple tools. It wasn't much, but it was enough. They laid Cole down carefully, though he groaned even in unconsciousness, pain cutting through whatever darkness held him. Water, Clara said. One of the men handed her a canteen. She worked without pause, cleaning the wounds, washing away dried blood and dirt. Each movement was precise, controlled. But when she reached his leg, she slowed. The damage was worse up close. Swelling, bruising. The bone not where it should be. Her jaw tightened slightly. This will hurt, she murmured, though he couldn't hear her. Or maybe he could, because as she began to set the bone, he woke. The scream tore out of him before he could stop it, raw and broken, echoing off the walls of the small room. His body jerked, instinct fighting pain. Hold him, Clara ordered. The men grabbed his shoulders as he thrashed weakly, panic flashing in his eyes. Easy, easy, one of them muttered. Cole's gaze snapped wildly around the room, unfocused at first. Then it landed on her, Clara. For a split second, confusion crossed his face. Then recognition, then something else. Shame. Don't move, she said firmly. Her voice cut through everything. Pain, fear, disorientation. Steady, grounding. You'll make it worse. He tried to speak, but the words collapsed into a strained breath. Pain surged again as she worked, resetting what had been broken, binding it tight with cloth and splints. By the time she finished, his strength had drained completely. His head fell back against the pillow. Sweat clung to his skin. His breathing slowed, but didn't steady. Not yet. The men left soon after. There was nothing more they could do, and perhaps nothing more they wanted to see. Clara remained. She always did. Hours passed. She cooled his fever with damp cloths, adjusted the bindings, forced small amounts of water past his lips when he drifted in and out of awareness. But when he did wake fully, late into the afternoon, his eyes found her again. This time there was no confusion, only understanding. He knew where he was, and who had saved him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, not empty, but heavy, filled with everything that had been said the day before, and everything that hadn't. Cole swallowed hard, his throat dry. You, his voice cracked, weak, strained. Why? It was a simple question, but it carried weight. Why help him? Why save the man who had humiliated her in front of the entire town? Clara didn't answer immediately. She dipped a cloth into cool water, wrung it out slowly, then placed it against his forehead. Her movements were calm, unbothered, as if the past hadn't touched her at all. You were injured, she said finally. Nothing more. No accusation, no bitterness, just truth. Cole's jaw tightened slightly. That's not enough, he whispered. Maybe it wasn't, but it was all she gave. Night fell again over Dry Hollow. This time, quieter, still. Inside the small house, a lantern flickered softly, casting warm light against worn wooden walls. Cole drifted between sleep and waking, pain never fully leaving him. And each time he surfaced, She was there. Not watching him, not judging, just there, changing bandages, preparing herbs, keeping him alive. And slowly, without realizing it, something inside him began to shift. Not pride, not yet. Something deeper, something more uncomfortable. Because the woman he had dismissed as too old, too plain, was now the only reason he was breathing. And for the first time in his life, Cole Bennett didn't feel powerful. He felt small, helpless, and completely at the mercy of someone who owed him nothing. The days after the storm did not pass quickly. They dragged themselves forward, slow, uneven, and painful, much like Cole Bennett's attempt to heal. Inside Clara's small home, time felt different. There were no clocks, no schedules, no outside world pressing in. Only the steady rhythm of survival, boiling water, changing bandages, measuring herbs, waiting for fevers to break and return again. Cole learned that pain has its own language. At first, it screamed. Then it whispered. Then it never left. He woke often, usually at night, when the lantern's flame had burned low and shadows stretched long across the wooden walls. In those moments he would try to move, and immediately regret it. Every attempt sent sharp fire through his leg, through his ribs, through everything that had been broken and forced back together. And always, she was there, Clara, not hovering, not fussing, just present, calm in a way that made his suffering feel louder. On the fourth day he spoke more clearly. "Why are you still doing this?" he asked, voice rough. Clara didn't look up from the cloth she was folding. "You're still injured," she replied. "That's not what I mean." A pause. The room was quiet except for the faint crackle of the lantern. Cole watched her carefully now, not like before, not with dismissal, with attention. It unsettled him how much that had changed in so little time. "I said things," he admitted, quieter now, "to you." Clara's hand stopped briefly, then continued folding. "I remember." 3 words. No emotion attached to them. That was somehow worse than anger. Cole exhaled slowly, frustration and shame tangled together. "I was wrong." Silence followed. He waited for something, anything, a reaction, a punishment, a crack in her calm. But Clara only reached for the herbs, measured them carefully, and placed them into a small bowl. "I know," she said at last. That was it. No forgiveness, no rejection, just acknowledgement. And somehow, that unsettled him more than anything else. By the second week, Cole could sit up. Barely. Pain still lived in every movement, but it was no longer constant. It came in waves instead. Manageable, if he stayed still enough, if he didn't think too much. Thinking was becoming dangerous, because when he thought, he noticed things. Like the way Clara moved through the room without hesitation, like the steadiness of her hands, like how she never complained, even when she hadn't slept properly in days, and most dangerous of all, how the world felt quieter when she was near. One evening rain returned, soft at first, then steady. Cole sat propped against the wall, watching the faint glow of the lantern flicker as Clara prepared another infusion. "You don't have to stay," he said suddenly. Clara didn't respond immediately. Outside, rain tapped gently against the roof, filling the silence between them. "I know," she said finally. That answer again. Simple, unmoving. "So why do you?" This time, she paused. Longer. She set the bowl down carefully before speaking. "Because leaving you would be easier," she said, "and not always right." The words landed differently than he expected. Not warm, not kind, but honest. Cole looked down at his hands. "I don't understand you," he muttered. "That's fine," Clara replied. Another pause. Then softer, but still controlled. "You're not meant to." That night, something changed. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was quieter than that. Cole woke to find the room empty except for him. The lantern had been adjusted, its flame steady again. His blanket had been repositioned. Fresh water sat beside him, and on the table, a folded cloth, still slightly warm from boiling water. Proof she had been there only moments before. He sat still, listening. The house was silent, but instead of relief, something unfamiliar rose in his chest. Unease. Not from pain, from absence. Clara returned later, rain damp on her sleeves, a bundle of herbs in her hand. She didn't ask if he was awake. She simply began preparing medicine as if nothing had changed. But something had. Cole watched her longer than he intended. "You never talk about yourself," he said. "There's nothing to say." "That can't be true." A faint pause. "Then, it is." He hesitated, then tried again. "I'm not used to this," he admitted. Clara glanced at him briefly. "Being helped?" "No," he said quietly. "Being helpless." That word hung in the air. Helpless. It didn't suit him, or at least, it hadn't before. Now it fit too well. Clara set the herbs into boiling water. "You will walk again," she said, "if you heal properly." "That's not what I meant," he replied. She finally looked at him fully. Not soft, not unkind, just direct. "I know," and that was when he realized something uncomfortable. She understood him better than he did himself. Days continued. Healing continued. But something else grew alongside it. Dependence. At first it was physical. He needed her to move, to eat, to survive. Then it became quieter. He needed her presence. The silence felt different when she left the room. Too empty, and worse, he started noticing how often he waited for her to return. Not because he needed care, but because he didn't want the room without her in it. That realization hit harder than any injury. Because Cole Bennett had never needed anyone, not once, until the woman he once called too old and too plain became the only reason his world still made sense. And that was the beginning of something he could not name yet. But it already had its hold on him, like poison, slow, sweet, unstoppable. The morning Cole Bennett decided he might lose her came quietly. No thunder, no storm, no warning from the sky. Just a soft light creeping through the small window of Clara's home, painting the wooden walls in pale gold. The kind of morning that should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like a countdown. Cole lay awake longer than usual. His body had improved, slowly, stubbornly, against all odds. The fever was gone. The worst of the pain had dulled into something manageable. He could sit without help now, even stand for a few seconds if he pushed himself too far. But healing had brought something else with it. Clarity. And clarity, he realized, was more dangerous than pain. Because pain kept him focused on surviving. Clarity made him think. And thinking always led him back to her. Clara. She moved through the room like she always did. Calm, steady, controlled. She checked a pot simmering over the small hearth, adjusted a cloth drying near the window, then reached for a bundle of herbs without hesitation. Everything she did had purpose. Nothing wasted, nothing uncertain. Cole watched her longer than he meant to. Something tight settled in his chest. "You're leaving soon, aren't you?" he asked suddenly. Clara didn't stop what she was doing. "I haven't said that." "You don't need to." A pause. Only the faint sound of boiling water filled the silence. Clara finally turned slightly. "That was the goal." Cole's jaw tightened. "That wasn't my question." She studied him for a moment. Not surprised, not defensive, just observant. Then she returned to her work. "That depends," she said. Cole frowned. "On what?" Clara added herbs to the pot, stirring slowly. "On whether you still need me." The words landed softly, but they struck deep. Cole shifted slightly, wincing as his leg reminded him of everything it still was. "That's not fair," he said. Clara's voice remained even. It's honest. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Cole stared at the floor. He hated that question, because it implied an answer he didn't want to admit. Need. He had never needed anyone before, not truly. But now, the idea of this room without her in it felt wrong in a way he couldn't explain. He forced his voice steady. I can manage. Clara glanced at him again, this time longer. You believe that? She asked. Cole hesitated. That hesitation betrayed him more than words ever could. Clara turned back to the hearth. I thought so, she said quietly. Something in her tone shifted. Not sadness, not anger, but distance. A subtle step back. Cole noticed it immediately, and it frightened him more than pain ever had. That evening, she began packing small things. Not many. A folded cloth here, a jar there. Simple signs, easy to miss, unless you were watching closely. But Cole was watching now. Too closely. You're leaving, he said again, sharper this time. Clara didn't deny it. I need to return to my work in the valley. Cole pushed himself upright, ignoring the flare of pain shooting through his leg. You can't just leave me like this. The words came out harsher than he intended. Clara stopped, slowly turned. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes hardened just slightly. I didn't leave you when you were dying, she said calmly. Don't confuse care with ownership. The words hit him harder than any fall from a horse. Cole swallowed. That's not what I meant. Clara picked up her satchel. Then choose your words better. Silence again, but this time it was different. This one had weight. Finality. Later that night, Cole didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The wind against the walls, the soft crack of wood settling, the distant call of night birds. But the loudest thing was the thought repeating in his mind. She's going to leave. Not because she hated him, not because she was angry, but because she was done, and he had no right to stop her. At dawn she was ready. The door stood open behind her. Morning light spilled in, framing her silhouette like something already halfway gone. Cole watched from the bed, unmoving. For once, he didn't try to stand. He knew he couldn't win this with force, or pride, or anything he had ever relied on before. Clara, he said quietly. She paused at the threshold. Didn't turn fully, just enough to listen. His throat tightened. He had faced stampedes, storms, pain, death, but nothing had made him feel like this. Small, human, honest. I was wrong, he said. A long pause followed. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just real. I was wrong about everything, he continued, voice lower now. About you, about myself, about what I thought mattered. Silence. Then, quieter. I don't want you to go. Clara didn't move. Cole forced the rest out before his courage broke. I don't deserve you staying, he said. But I can't pretend I'm fine without you here. That was it. No pride left in the words. No mask. Just truth. Clara finally turned fully toward him. For the first time, she didn't look like someone passing through his life. She looked like someone deciding. The wind outside shifted slightly. Soft, waiting. Cole held his breath without realizing it. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. It didn't matter. Then she spoke. You didn't lose everything out there in the storm, she said quietly. Cole didn't answer. Clara adjusted her satchel. You lost your certainty, she continued. That's harder to survive than injury. Another pause. Then softer. And I don't fix men who refuse to change. Cole's chest tightened. I am changing, he said quickly. Clara studied him again. Long. Careful. Then she said something that stayed longer than anything else in the room. Then prove it, when I'm not here to catch you. And with that, she stepped outside. The door didn't slam. It simply closed. Softly. Completely. Cole sat in silence. For the first time since the storm, there was no one in the room with him, and the emptiness she left behind felt louder than any stampede. The days after Clara left did not feel like healing. They felt like withdrawal. The small house that once held warmth now felt stripped of it. The lantern still burned at night. The water still boiled when needed. The herbs still sat neatly in their jars. But nothing carried meaning anymore. Everything was functional. Nothing was alive. Cole Bennett learned quickly that recovery is not just physical. It is emotional starvation. At first he told himself it was temporary. She would return. She had to. But as hours turned into days, and days into a week, the truth began to settle into him with quiet, unavoidable weight. Clara wasn't coming back. Not for him, not for anyone who hadn't earned it. And that realization hurt more than the broken bone in his leg ever had. By the second week, Cole could walk again. Not well, not without pain, but enough. Enough to reach the doorway. Enough to stand outside and feel the wind on his face without collapsing. The world outside had moved on without him. Dry Hollow was the same, but he wasn't. People noticed it too. The once confident rancher now moved slower, spoke less, and avoided the usual places where pride used to carry him. Whispers followed him, but he no longer fed them with arrogance. He no longer had anything to prove, only something to fix. If it could be fixed at all. One afternoon, he returned to the ridge, the place where everything had broken. The land still bore scars, flattened grass, hardened soil, faint traces of the chaos that had once swept through it like a living force. Cole stood there for a long time. The wind moved through the grass quietly, like nothing had ever happened. But he remembered. Everything. And for the first time, he didn't blame the storm. He blamed himself. Not for falling, but for believing he didn't have to listen to anything or anyone, especially her. He began working the next day. Not for recognition, not for pride, just because there was nothing else to do with the man he had become. He repaired fences, helped rebuild damaged barns, carried supplies for people who once looked at him like he was untouchable. And when they asked questions, he didn't answer with arrogance anymore. He answered with work. Slowly, quietly, something shifted. Not in the town, in him. But every night, when the world went still again, the same thought returned. Clara. Not as a memory of kindness, not even as the woman who saved his life, but as the one person who saw him at his lowest and still chose to leave because she didn't need him. And he finally understood what that meant. A month passed, then another. Winter began to ease its grip on the land, and still she did not return. Until the morning Cole stopped waiting for it. That was the morning he started walking toward her instead. The journey took him 2 days. Pain followed him the entire way, not just in his leg, but in every step that forced him to confront who he used to be. He didn't ride. He walked, because he didn't feel he deserved the ease of a horse anymore. When he finally reached the valley, he found her exactly where he expected she would be. Working, not waiting, not looking, just living. Clara stood beside a small stream, hands busy with herbs and cloth, her focus steady and unbroken by the world around her. She didn't turn when she heard him approach, but she knew. Of course she knew. "You're late," she said calmly. Cole stopped a few steps behind her. "I wasn't sure I should come." That made her pause. Finally, she turned. Her expression was the same as he remembered, steady, unreadable, unshaken, but this time it didn't feel distant. It felt honest. "I told you," she said. "Don't come back as the same man." Cole swallowed. "I didn't." Clara studied him for a long moment. Not searching for perfection, not expecting transformation, just truth. Finally, she spoke. "Then why are you here?" Cole exhaled slowly. Because the answer wasn't simple. Because nothing about him was simple anymore. Because I stopped thinking you were something I could lose and get back later, he said quietly. And started understanding you were never mine to begin with. Silence. The wind moved gently through the valley. Clara looked at him for a long time. Not softening, not forgiving, just understanding. You don't get to return to the version of me that saved you, she said at last. Cole nodded. I know. And you don't get to decide what I owe you. I know that too. Another pause, longer this time. Then Clara stood fully, brushing her hands clean. Good, she said simply. Cole frowned slightly. Good? She met his eyes. Because that means you're finally listening. The silence between them stretched, not uncomfortable, but uncertain. A new kind of space, not filled with pain, not filled with pride. Something in between. Cole spoke again, softer this time. I don't know what this is supposed to be. Clara turned slightly toward the stream. Neither do I. That honesty surprised him. She continued, but I know what it isn't. Cole waited. Clara looked back at him. It isn't you being saved anymore. A quiet breath left him. I understand, he said. And for once, he meant it. The river kept moving beside them. The wind didn't stop. Nothing dramatic happened. No declaration, no sudden forgiveness, no perfect ending. Just two people standing in the same place they once never would have met as equals. One who learned too late. One who never needed him to learn at all. And between them, something fragile, something real, something that could only begin when neither of them was trying to own the other.